by identifying in the chat pod in the lower left corner. Folks, there is no audio occurring right now. I'm giving you time to answer the questions that are on the poll questions that are on the screen. All right, folks, thank you so much for answering those poll questions. We're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. I'm going to give a moment to make sure that the closed captioning is connected, so I apologize. It will be just a short moment for us to get that going again. So please just hold on for a minute until we could get that established. All right, we're just going to go ahead. Hopefully the capture can reconnect while we're getting started here. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our next option in the webinar series, Internal Coordination. We have two of your peers presenting today to talk about their experiences with coordinating internally, whether it be within their agency or within their across agencies that they work with. We have Mr. Justin Barclay from MTA. He is the Program Manager for Transit Asset Management. And we also have Mr. Matthew Wilson from JTA, and he is the Fixed Assets Manager. They're both going to talk about how they are organized for success and how to educate and train for transit asset management, with some common themes being the repetitious nature. Buy-in is not one time, it's ongoing, and it comes from multiple levels, up, down, and side issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin.
All right, hello, my name is Justin Barclay, and Mishidani, for some reason, I can't control the slide.
Please click in the slide box and then try those arrows at the bottom. That might make a difference.
Yeah, that's not showing up this time.
Okay. Just let me know. I'll do it for you.
All right. So you go ahead to the next slide. So my name is Justin Barclay. I'm the Program Manager for Transit Asset Management at MTA. And I will be speaking to you on internal education and executive staff buy-in. Next slide.
Justin, for some reason, it looks like the slides are not advancing.
Right.
Just give me 1 second. I apologize.
Right.
Just
okay.
1 second. Please go ahead.
All right. So you can go to the next slide.
Justin, I apologize. I think that you're not seeing what I'm seeing. Can you try to take control of the slide deck again?
Yes, so I'm clicking on it. And nothing.
The arrows down at the bottom, the left and right arrow?
Yeah, it's not there. Oh. Try your mouse wheel. She's doing that. There you go. Now you got the arrows. There we go.
Still hear you.
Yep. All right. Well, just 1 second. There we are. All right. Let me go back here to the previous slide. All right. So, once again, I'm from the Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Transit Administration. To give you some background information about us, we do service an area of about 1,795 square miles. We are multimodal, including bus, rail, commuter bus, and that should not have jumped, and paratransit, which we call mobility. We also have oversight of 23 locally operated transit systems throughout the state of Maryland, 20 of which are Tier 2 subrecipients. And as of the most recent inventory update completed at the end of October 2017, we have $9.25 billion in assets. So some challenges over the course of the history of asset management here at MTA, which we have been doing for roughly 5 years. We have had multiple changes in leadership during that time. We have encountered the issue of asset owners not understanding what's in it for them, how does it benefit them, etc. And also, asset management is very complex, and many seasoned professionals don't understand it, or the difference between inventory management and asset management. And then we've also faced an issue where asset management has been viewed as a completely separate silo from safety management, rather than both working in tandem. So at M.MTA, we have both the core M.MTA and the Office of Local Transit Support. At M.MTA, asset management efforts is a continual process, recently leading to some successes with the completion of our Transit Asset Management Directive, which is our version of a policy in line with the MDOT policy, and Transit Asset Management Plan, both of which were signed in November. And our ongoing work involves improving our asset inventory, standardizing naming conventions, tracking down assets that we currently do not have listed, which is an ongoing process. And we are utilizing TermLite to project the state of good repair needs, prioritization, and capital expense forecasting. Sorry, that jumped for a second. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
I saw some comments that people can't hear. Okay, there was apparently in the other room, someone came in and said that there was an issue with people not being able to hear, so I wanted to make sure. For some reason, the arrow went away at the bottom of the screen.
Do you see a button that says sync on your presentation box? You might have to sync it.
I do not see that. Let me go out of it. It was working there for the first few slides. Not sure why we're having issues today. Let's see. Yeah, it completely disappeared again. You can see the comment. We're saying no audio, but some of them are saying yes audio.
We can hear you even though you're whispering. So, yeah, there are some people that are having audio issues, but there are a majority of people that can hear.
Okay.
And just for those, as far as the presentation is concerned, it is available for download in the upper left-hand pod. So if the slideshow is not advancing, you can download it there and follow along with Justin as he talks through his presentation.
So is there a way you can bring the arrows back up?
If you cannot select them from the screen, I can't bring them back up. And when I advance them, they don't advance for you.
Okay, because it was there and now it's gone again. All right, well, I will just go on with the rest of this current slide that we're on. So that brings us to the Office of Local Transit Support, which is within M.MTA. And there we oversee asset management for 23 subrecipients, 3 Tier 1 and 20 Tier 2 agencies. We are currently developing a single group TAM policy and transit asset management plan for all Tier 2 agencies, and are also easing the process for inventory reporting. We have had great success in educating accountable executives and key staff across the locally operated transit systems in asset management and safety management through regular workshops. And if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. There we go. Go back one. There we are. All right, so for right now, I will focus solely on M.MTA for the next couple of slides, and then I will turn over to the Office of Local Transit Support. So as I mentioned, we've had some recent transit asset management successes here at M.MTA, of which is the completion of the Transit Asset Management Directive and the Transit Asset Management Plan, both of which were signed in November by the administrator, a year ahead of the FTA requirement. And also, the Transit Asset Management Plan was reviewed by key M.MTA staff and asset owners across all modes, which was an effort to also educate them in the process on asset management within M.MTA. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And this is our Transit Asset Management Directive. While it's not the complete directive, this is the commitment for M.MTA in regards to asset management. I'm not going to go into each individual one, but I would like to point out the second bullet point, which is identifying all safety critical assets within the asset inventory and prioritizing efforts to maintain those safety critical assets in a state of good repair. And I wanted to point this out because M.MTA has always had it in its foresight the link between asset management and safety management, which is why we were sure to put this directly into our directive. Next slide. And our transit asset management plan covers 90% of the federal requirements for transit asset management plans. So we have completed everything except for implementation of resources. And our reason for this is why we wanted to put out our asset management plan a year ahead of the FTA requirement in order to allow for key staff across the agency to read the plan, understand what is in it, attend meetings, and work on improvement projects within the plan in order to slowly understand what their role will be within asset management at M.MTA, which will further allow room for conversation regarding funding and personnel. Next slide. Thank you. So as you can see, we have our agency-wide transit asset management plan, and below that, we have the lifecycle management plans for all of our modes, all of which have been complete with exception to the Purple Line lifecycle management plan, and that is a new rail line that is currently being built outside of DC, and that is currently in progress, as well as the MTA Police lifecycle management plan. Next slide. So lifecycle management plans. A lifecycle management plan describes the performance measures and targets that are aligned with the commitments that are established within the transit asset management plan and strategies for delivering these performance targets and other mode department-specific approaches to continually improve the management of its transit assets and land assets over their life cycle. Together, the Office of Planning and Programming and the Office of Safety, Quality, and Risk Management facilitate both the development of the Transit Asset Management Plan and the System Safety Program Plan. These lifecycle management plans were drafted in order to meet the broad objectives outlined in both plans while aligning with other policies, plans, and procedures that are currently in place with each mode. The lifecycle management plans were developed through meeting with key asset owners in each mode, educating them on asset management over the course of the drafting of the LMPs, and establishing a plan on how to best manage their assets based on current practices and analysis. Future iterations of the lifecycle management plans will work on improving these practices and analysis based on new and updated data with our asset management process. Next slide. And that brings us to internal education and participation at M.MTA. We conduct bi-weekly asset management meetings with all project managers and program managers and executive staff at M.MTA regarding their work with asset management. As I mentioned before, we developed a transit asset management directive and plan that involved agency-wide review. And we also utilize workshops to collaborate how TermLight prioritizes its asset needs. Over the summer, we had a series of 5 workshops where we brought in asset owners from across the modes and involved them in actually prioritizing the assets within TermLight based on our data and our needs rather than default data generated by TermLight. In addition to this, we have this coming December, in about a week, we have key staff across M.MTA and the Office of Local Transit Support participating in the Institute of Asset Management Training and Certification course, in addition to attending relevant conferences, seminars, and webinars related to asset management. And this is our first step in really getting a common language across the asset management team at M.MTA. In the future, we are developing a series of workshops to explore the interface of safety management and asset management to break down that silo mindset that asset management and safety management are separate, and this will provide a basis for educating staff. And we are also planning internal workshops to increase the knowledge and awareness for asset management across M.MTA for the coming years. Next slide. And that brings us to the Office of Local Transit Support. This is an excellent example of where M.MTA and the Office of Local Transit Support has really excelled in education for asset management and safety management. Here we have conducted several in-person and online asset management workshops to educate the 20 Tier 2 subrecipients in asset management and FTA requirements with ongoing training. We have also created tools that will ease the inventory update process for Tier 2 accountable executives, and we have provided other tools such as fact sheets that answer common questions regarding the reporting requirements, as well as a timeline and checklist, which we will go into further in the upcoming slides. We are currently in the process of developing a group transit asset management policy and plan for the 20 Tier 2 transit agencies across Maryland, and that should be finished by late spring. Next slide. Here is an example of the educational outreach efforts that we have done with the locally operated transit system since we started this effort in 2015. As you can see from the list, we have constantly held both asset management and safety management training across all of the workshops, and we are currently planning a in-person workshop that will cover 2 days in January for asset management and safety management. Next slide. The following slides are examples of some of the tools that we provided to the locally operated transit systems. This is an asset management fact sheet, and here we help them discern the difference between useful life and useful life benchmark, as that is a common problem since they both are very similar in naming convention. We also help them with establishing the performance measures and targets, key information on what they need in their asset inventory, as well as to be federally compliant. Next page. Here's another example. We did a 1.5 year, roughly, timeline that highlights both their requirements for MTA reporting as well as their requirements for the FTA. And we are helping them along the way for each step to make sure that they ease into the process and are able to do everything without any problems. Next page. And here is one other example of one of the tools that we created for our locally operated transit systems, and that is this asset management checklist for regional planners. And this really breaks down everything that they need to do towards completion of their reporting, which will greatly help them in the process. Next page. So to summarize, some challenges that we faced across both M.MTA and the locally operated transit systems, which is our Tier 2 subrecipients, has been changes in leadership, asset owners just not understanding what's in it for them, how it's going to benefit their agency or our agency as a whole, also the complexity of asset management and people just simply not understanding it the first go-around. And we are working on fixing that going forward. And also the problem that asset management being viewed completely separate from safety management. We are really focusing on bringing those both together as one. And so some solutions to these problems that we faced is an early development of a transit asset management directive and policy and transit asset management plan, which will allow stakeholders across the agencies and Tier 2 agencies to really have something tangible to react to and understand asset management for their agencies as well as the role that they can play within asset management. Also frequent, sometimes weekly, interaction with agency employees at all levels. In addition, as I showed you with the Office of Local Transit Support, we created fact sheets and checklists as well as other tools to help staff better understand roles and responsibilities. And as we progress at M.MTA, we will likely be establishing tools for us as well here at the core M.MTA. In addition, we utilize asset management improvement projects to involve key staff, educating them on the job throughout the process, and also providing an explicit emphasis on integrating safety staff in the conversation to once again bring in that link that asset management and safety management are related and intertwined and not separate silos. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justin. That was very informative, and it sounds like you guys are well on your way. I apologize for not doing the housekeeping prior, but there have been a couple of questions coming in the chat pod about downloading the files. Both presentations provided by Justin and the next presentation by Matt are currently available in the upper left-hand corner. If you select the file, the download file button will become available, and that's how you can download the file. So you'll have it accessible right now. But these will also be available on the TAM webpage at the conclusion of this webinar. So without further ado, we'll take questions at the end. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is Matt Wilson from JTA, and hopefully, Matt, you'll be able to take control of the slides yourself if you could give that a shot just to make sure. Otherwise, I will. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shadoni. My name, like she said, is Matt Wilson. I am the Fixed Assets Manager for the Jacksonville Transportation Authority here in Jacksonville, Florida. I'll be taking you through my own version of internal coordination and how to get buy-in. Biggest thing, give you some background on the JTA. We are an independent agency of the state of Florida, covering the Duval County area, which is a 762 square miles with a population just under 1 million. Growth in the range of 11% over the last 5 years, median income right around $50,000, and we, of course, are a Tier 1 agency. We are also multimodal in the extreme. We have 24 BRTs, 144 fixed routes, 10 community shuttles, 98 paratransit, 5.2 miles of fixed raised guideway, and, of course, our favorite that we inherited last year, the one ferry, comprised of a staff of well over 800. That's our basic background. Organizational chart is standard for most everybody. Ours, we have our board, CEO that reports to the board, our 6 VPs, all their senior managers under them, all their managers under them, and of course our staff. Our staff is, of course, just like most everybody else, both union and non-union. So when we started this, of course, everybody had to learn what TAM was to begin with, what transit asset management was, and you also had to figure out a way to get them all to buy into it. So how did we actually get buy-in from everyone? This is the process we used. The start for us was establishing an asset management committee back in 2014. We designated senior staff from all departments to actually comprise this committee. They met monthly, discussed tasks and rising issues, as well as the regulations as they were being developed by the FTA. Their specific tasks were to review the procedures of all procedures throughout the agency, review of best practices when dealing with asset management, not just in transit, but outside transit as well, and a review and reply to all the FTA rules as they were actually being developed themselves. Their goals: complete a self-assessment of the agency as a whole, identify agency priorities, both for TAM and anything that related to TAM, and define a plan. For us, it was a success. 2015, we had a plan, but this plan was at a high level. It identified our needed resources to complete the plan and an overview about how to go about it, but not the details. But now that we had a plan, the question becomes, what do you do with that? Well, now you got to sell it. You got to sell it to everybody within the agency. You saw the 800 plus that we have and the multiple levels. Everybody wants different things. So how do we start the sale? First thing we did was we went after the high level. We went to educate our ELT, our executive level, our CEO, and our board. We knew that we had to sell the plan to them. Without them, there's no money, there's no resources. So how did we get their attention? How did we get their buy-in? We pitched it. We explained to them the federal regulations. We explained to them the cost of non-compliance, both from a grant perspective and if we weren't keeping up with SGR within the agency itself, failure of service. Then we also brought to them the results from our self-assessment, where we actually stood compared to where they all thought we stood. Our goals, 2015, were specifically get commitment from the ELT, from our CEO, and from our board. What do we need commitment? Commitment to do the actual project and commitment to resources. We needed dedicated staff. We needed funding. We needed a consultant. We needed a champion on our ELT and our CEO. We did it. We were successful. We got our dedicated staff. That's actually how I came to be, by the way. We got our funding, base funding, Not everything that we're going to need eventually, but enough to get started. And we got our champion. Not only did our CEO volunteer to be the champion, but we had a VP specifically assigned that was well into this, that believed in asset management. And he's still here with us today. So now we had the resources that we needed, and we had the buy-in from the upper management. Now we had to put those resources together in order to make the second sale, which is to the senior managers and the managers. So 2016, we took the allotted resources that we were given by our ELT, and we formed a steering committee. That steering committee was made up of our VP, the champion VP, senior managers, and project leads, TAMP project leads. We also formed a TAMP working committee. TAMP working committee was made up of project leads, of course, but then department level managers, the managers that are doing the daily grind, that know what's going on and what needs to be done. So now we have two different committees actually formed. The steering committee met once a month. The TAMP working committee met once every other week, or more often if needed. And we had a pitch to sell them. We had to educate them and explain to them what TAM was to them now. Federal regulations, cost of non-compliance, there goes that operating money they needed, and the benefits, the data you could get from creating a true TAMP. The funding arguments that came from that data to help them actually do their budget plans and figure out what they really needed going out 20 years. The goals was to get commitment from the senior managers and managers, get their buy-in so that we didn't just have their buy-in, but we had their engagement. Also, to develop an RFP for what we needed from a consultant. We considered 2016 a success. 2017, we actually hired a consultant at the beginning of 2017. So for us, that was a success. The sale went well, both levels. We had resources from the upper level, we had full buy-in and engagement from the middle and lower level. And this is what we ended up with. This is an outline chart of our entire project. You can see the TAMP steering committee I was discussing before up at the top, meeting monthly. You see the TAMP working committee in the middle, meeting on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, depending on how often it was needed, to complete all the tasks along there to actually create a real TAMP plan. You see the project administrators, and you see the consultant support, because we knew we needed experience in order to do this. At the bottom, you also see work groups. Those work groups are headed up by the individual TAMP working committee members, and that actually takes it to the lower level, to the staff level. So you have these middle managers that are actually building work groups of their staff so that there's input now from the bottom all the way up to the top, and from the top all the way down to the bottom. So you have input every direction. Everybody feels like they're a part of it, and you're going to get more out of it. Lessons that we learned. First thing we learned was diversifying. 2014, we put together a group of senior managers to kind of come up with a plan. But what we learned from doing that was the fact that they didn't have all the answers. You needed it from the people in the field as well. Include your staff from all levels. Our steering committee had executive and senior managers. Working committee had senior managers and managers, mid-levels. The work groups themselves had the managers and the staff that actually do the work. Remember, to get buy-in, you're going to have multiple sales pitches. Don't prepare one sales pitch for everyone. Prepare it for each staff level, because different people need different things. Different things are more important depending on the level you're at. Executive and board, focus on the regulations, cost of non-compliance, what the plan is. Not only do they want to know, why do we have to do this, what's going to happen if we don't, but how do we get there? You got to have some sort of outline plan to win them over. Senior managers, manager staff, focus on the regulations, benefits such as centralized data source, consistency, Funding arguments for budgets, seamless transition with little change in daily operations, which you're going to find out if you haven't already gotten to that point is a big thing for ordinary staff. They don't want to have to increase their workload. So if you can figure out a way like we've been doing to fit it into their normal workload to where they don't even notice they're doing it, you'll win them over because they don't see a change. And in a lot of things, you're now streamlining it with actual data sources, systems, which means you're making their jobs even easier, less spreadsheets. But the biggest thing for us, lessons learned, is continuous buy-in. We told you, 2015, 2016, we got buy-in from every level. Kept working, we put our working groups together. But you lose that buy-in if you don't keep them interested, don't keep them up to date and involved. So you have to remember, buy-in only lasts so long. You have to continually refresh the buy-in from all levels. And this is how we do it. We had the original sales pitch to our ELT and our board in 2015. However, when we brought our consultant on, we took them back and took them in for half a day and did what we called ELT Immersion Trainings. Taught them about what asset management as a whole for the entire agency really means. Reminded them what the federal regulations were, and at this point we now had the final rules. Reminded them what the benefits and the costs were if they didn't comply, and then outlined the final project plan that we came up with as part of the order for our actual consultants. Then we took another step. We brought in the senior managers and managers, the people that are part of the committees. Again, explained to them what full asset management was. Again, reminded them the federal regulations and the benefits, the data, the information, the arguments to actually get the money they really need in their actual budget every year. And then we did individual interviews and work sessions to develop exactly what information needed to go in and how it needed to be organized into the actual plan. And then we continue. This is something we do on a monthly basis, what we call a sunshine meeting because we're down here in the state of Florida. But we do this monthly for all our ELT, our CEO, and our senior managers to keep them involved. Progress reports, where we are, what's been done, what's coming. Discussions of issues and solutions. What are the problems that we're having? Does anybody have any ideas? We have all the senior management in these meetings, which means we can get answers to problems right then. And discussing internal and external factors. How do we communicate this with our TPO? How do we communicate with the FDOT, Florida DOT, to make sure that we're all on the same page for everything everybody's doing? And that's how we keep the buy-in going. Any questions?
Well, thanks, Matt. I'm going to, on behalf of all of us, say thank you to both you and Justin for your very candid presentations on how you have developed buy-in both within your agency and with your partners. We're going to switch over to the Q&A now, so if both of you could unmute your phones, there will be questions for both of you. And for those of you participating, please feel free to continue to add your questions to the Q&A pod. It is now at the top of your screen so that you can see it a little bit easier. And I have been keeping track as well throughout the presentations of some of the questions that came in earlier. And I do want to let you guys know, both Matt and Justin, folks have both said how very cool and nice the presentations were. There was a specific shout out to the staff and some other complimentary things that were put in the chat pod. But the first question that I have was actually for Justin, and Avital asked, did you use any consultants to help you do your prioritization?
Yes, we did. We did bring in outside consultant support to help us with both our inventory update process as well as writing our transit asset management directive and plan and prioritization.
Okay, great. And Barbara, this is also for you, Justin, or it came in during your presentation, but Matt might want to chime in as well. Barbara asked, well, this is more for Justin, asked about your checklist. Actually, there was a couple of people that were interested in your checklist, and if you would make those publicly available, either directly to this group or something that I could post on our webpage.
I actually have a senior staff person here who has been involved with asset management and actually created that checklist. So I'm going to let him talk about the checklist for you real quick, and I'm sure we can work something out there.
Yeah, I think we could easily make that available. We would just need to make it clear that the checklist was developed not to exclusively mesh with FTA asset management requirements, but MTA has existing grant-making processes that they use with the local transit operators, and it's meant to equally support that process and some additional requirements that MTA decided to build at a state level that are slightly more stringent than the FTA requirements. So as long as we have that kind of caveat and people understand that this isn't perfectly matched to the final rule on asset management, then I think we would be good.
Okay, I'm sure that that could be addressed. And in fact, our current peer library does have some materials that are both more and less than the rule requirements. So I'm sure that we could address that. So there was another question from David Mulinga who asked, Justin, how is your TAM governance structure? Your data governance, how, I believe how you are structuring the data collection, or how you're formatting the information exchange with that large group. David, if you want to clarify your question in the chat pod, that would be fine. Otherwise, I can move on to another question, unless you guys wanted to take a stab at that.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely. So we're actually mapping them in line with the templates for the term light inventory. So we're just matching it up with that to put it into our tool, and that is also being done by consultant support as well. At this point, we are working on moving towards in-house management of term light.
Okay. There was a question from John Wimmer. What was the data used to quantify the cost of noncompliance?
Who was that question for?
I believe that was for you. No, that I think may have been for Matt.
Yeah, we did not calculate that, so unless Matt had something more to offer.
I mean, as far as the data we use to quantify the cost of noncompliance, noncompliance means that you're not within FTA guidelines, therefore you can actually, I mean, not meeting the goal part and everything, but not actually preparing your TAM plan means you're not in compliance, therefore you could actually potentially lose your grants. So the compliance and the quantification that we actually argued was how much federal grants we had coming in. We use that as our baseline because noncompliance means noncompliance with all grants.
And Matt, what consultant did you use?
We actually hired Gannett Fleming. They're still working with us.
I believe this is also for Matt. Mark wanted you to clarify what role did the consultant perform in your process?
We brought the consultant in after we had an idea and the rules were actually finalized. They're actually helping us develop most everything and have been for the last 6 months. So they actually helped us put an inventory list together to make sure we included everything, not just, because we took it farther than what the FTA is wanting. Our inventory list comprises most every asset that we own and multiple levels, but we can identify out what the FTA wants. Then they're also helping us go through, at this point, the condition assessments, and then they'll actually help us write the actual TAMP plan as well as do the SGR review itself. So we're using them to go back through all the data we had already collected before, refine it, and turn it into a final TAM.
Okay, thank you. This question from Crystal Horton is actually for Justin. I believe she asks about the 15,000 threshold for MDOT asset inventory. She wants to know if that was pre-existing, and if not, how you were able to gain consensus on what to include.
Yeah, so that's actually a Tier 2 subrecipient question, so I'm going to let John take the lead on that.
Yeah, so MTA has always, and just to elaborate on what Justin said, just to be clear, that dollar threshold does not apply to MTA as a Tier 1 agency. It's a rule that it employs when helping guide and oversee the Tier 2 subrecipients when they're developing their asset management plan. So as the designated recipient of federal funds in Maryland and doing that oversight of the subrecipients, MTA for many, many years, over a decade, has already required those small transit operators to submit an inventory of their capital assets. It's part of their justification and always has been for the annual grant-making process. And they've always had a dollar threshold associated with what needs to be reported in that inventory. Actually, in the past, that dollar threshold was much lower. It was at $1,000. And when FTA defined the $50,000 threshold in their final rule, and knowing that we were going to have to start including more assets, like third-party assets, in that inventory, MTA decided to loosen up that threshold for the locally operated transit systems and bump it up to 15. There's no specific magic as to how we got to 15. We just looked at a number of assets and asked ourselves which ones would we end up excluding depending on the threshold that we set.
Okay, thank you. That was very useful, kind of delineation of how you move from the grant requirements and the TAM requirements thresholds for dollar figures. I have a question here for both presenters from Ulysses. He wants to know what organizational changes were done to succeed and to coordinate, for instance, to reduce the silos. Did org charts, were they improved for better flow of data? And another question later on that you guys could maybe answer right now is, where does asset management fall on your org chart? If you could answer those, Justin first and then Matt.
Absolutely. So on our end, it was solely in more and more meetings, keeping the conversation going on separating those silos. And we are currently actually working on, as I mentioned in my presentation, a series of workshops coming up where we really delve even deeper into that, into the nexus between safety management and asset management.
For us, on getting rid of the silos, we actually built that into our committees. So as you saw with the committees that I showed on the slide, both our top committee involves senior managers from every department. Our regular working committees involve regular managers from every department. We didn't have to change our org chart. We just had to find out where the pressure points were in each department, where the opinions were to actually get information flowing and get involvement. And then, of course, we follow that up with those sunshine meetings to bring the senior managers from every department and the VPs from every department back into a meeting and let them know what's going on. We found that's the best way, and the only way to truly break down the silos was including people at all levels from all departments in different ways.
All right, thanks, guys. There are a number of questions on here that I kind of think might be a little too specific for this format, such as how much it costs and what was specifically in your RFP. I'm going to direct those people to potentially reach out to you directly for some more specific information. But the next question, I think, is probably a fundamental question. How did you figure out that you even needed a consultant? Either one, good. Whoever wants to tackle that one.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take the lead on that, but since I've only been here for 6 months, I'm going to refer to John, who was here from pretty much the beginning for the most part, and he can go into detail in that regard.
I guess I would say that it started out just really as an issue of bandwidth. There's a lot of information to digest. There's a lot of analyses that need to be done to gather momentum and build towards an asset management plan. And here in the state of Maryland, we're a state agency. Our CEO reports up right through to the governor, and so we're limited on the number of state pins that we have in order to staff efforts like this. So consultants for us are kind of something that's necessary in order to add horsepower, for lack of better words, when we have big efforts, and they act like an extension of staff, and that was the driving force here for us.
Ours was honestly about the same, and that's actually a very good explanation you provided. Our biggest thing was the fact that you needed so many people of so many different disciplines, and yes, we had them within the agency, but we didn't have enough time for them to do their regular jobs and still be able to do this on top of it, because it does involve a true investment. They still have time to participate, they still have time for the committees, they still have time to data gather for us, but putting it together, doing the calculations, doing the system changes for our IT, because we actually improved our EAM system, and we're actually doing enhancements to it just to hold all the information. So just looking at that, when I first came on, it was already a decision in process, but it was backed up just by the expertise you needed, and you couldn't take all the time away from the staff you currently had in order to complete it.
Thanks, guys. That was very useful. Really quickly, Justin, did you ever mention which consultant you guys used?
We actually use two consulting firms mainly for asset management efforts, and that is WSP and also CH2M Hill.
Okay, thanks.
CH2M Hill runs our term light and our inventory update, and WSP does all of our transit asset management plan and directive. They drafted all of that, as well as our life cycle management plans and most of our other asset management needs.
Okay, great. Mike, you're asking about the PowerPoints. Those presentations are downloadable from the presentation pod, which is located at the bottom left side of your screen. If you select it, then you can download. The download button will show up. So, Justin, there's a question from Cheryl that asked about your training and certification. What source did you use for the training and certification program?
I assume that she's referring to the Institute of Asset Management training and certification, and that is being done through CH2M Hill.
Note, however, that the Institute of Asset Management is an independent organization based in the United Kingdom that focuses on creating asset management guidance across industry. The training that's being provided actually could be acquired through a variety of vendors. It's not proprietary to any one consulting firm.
Okay. So we have about 9 minutes left in the webinar, and there's really no way we're going to be able to get through all of the rest of these questions. I will try to ask as many as possible. How many staff are dedicated to your asset management, Matt?
One full-time staff, that's me, but I've got a lot of help from pretty much every department that we actually have. And they're part-time on top of their normal jobs, as well as, like I said, the big haul actually comes from our consultants.
Okay. I believe both of you mentioned the name of the software that you were using to implement the decision support tool. If you haven't, do you mind mentioning those? I think you said Term Light, right, Justin?
Yeah, so we have Term Light as our prioritization and asset management tool for maintaining our inventory. And then we are also currently developing a prioritization investment tool for call for projects that we actually just had a meeting this morning with WSP on, and we're going to have that built and ready for the next round of call for projects early next year. And that's going to be a custom-made system for us.
Okay. Matt, did you mention?
What we're using for our data gathering is Oracle EAM. We haven't selected a prioritization tool yet. We're basing it off the term light, but we'll actually probably implement something on top of the manual prioritization we've already set up in EAM.
Okay. So that'll be another customized software program. I got a question here. When prioritizing, how did you accommodate the need to also fund assets that don't compete well with primary transit assets? If you can address that at this time. I know, Matt, I think I just heard you say you didn't have that accomplished yet, but.
We still have our prioritizations in place, but we've also set up our EAM at a component level so that we can actually have competition between non-transit assets like computers and things of that sort versus actual buses and engines and transmissions. So we've already thought about that. We've actually also put into the life cycles. We've identified what the risks are, both to service and both to cost expense, as far as what it would cost us if something went out of service, so that we can actually rank them all, not just what FTA is wanting, but all the way down to the minute level.
And for us, up until now, we have been using the old prioritization method that did not go off of our current data. However, with the tool that we are having built right now, we will be using that going forward with current data. So that is in the works.
Okay. Does your maintenance staff use the results of condition assessments to plan or schedule maintenance activities?
They already did prior to our asset management efforts. Sorry about that, Matt.
You're fine.
They already did at m.mta?
That's correct.
And Matt, what were you going to say?
Our condition assessments are underway right now, so it hasn't been used, but it's already built into our prioritization.
Okay. And I think this is actually probably the last question that is unique. Did either agency make policy about having future system expansion or rehab capital projects provide all the baseline data on the new assets to plug directly into the agency system, including initial expected life of componentry?
Our information and our data on all our assets are broken up, and a life cycle is actually completed for each category. So anytime something new is bought, we already take into account what the original cost is. We have a way in the system to actually track the soft cost or operational cost during its use, during its life, as well as recognizing what the initial estimated life is. So all of that's built into our life cycle sheets already.
I'm not 100% sure if I'm understanding the core of the question, but I'm going to answer it a slightly different way. When it comes to looking at the life, the expected useful life of an asset, we're already tracking that, but something that we want to get into at some point in the future, once we become more sophisticated with asset management, is being able to assess the costs of managing an asset over its life cycle and get away from prioritization of assets only on their initial cost, but start to be able to, in certain cases, use total life cycle costs as a means of prioritizing investments and choosing between alternatives. So that's something that we wish to get to, and our commitment to investigating this space is in our agency-wide asset management plan.
Okay, this is going to be the last question, and if I don't get to your question during this actual webinar, I will share them with the presenters and try to address your question offline. Elizabeth wanted to know, did each asset class produce its own TAM first, or was there only an enterprise-wide TAM prepared? I think that's from Matt.
I'm not understanding that question.
Neither am I.
It's possible that was for us, given that we had a slide showing our agency-wide asset management plan and then these modal lifecycle management plans. We developed them simultaneously. We wanted to kind of have that top-down approach with the agency-wide policy and plan, while at the same time building bottom-up with inventory and interacting with our operating modes and really getting a baseline understanding of their current asset management practices. I don't know if that was the intent of the question, but that's my best shot at answering it.
I think you're probably right. I don't know. That question came in later on, so I'm not sure if she was referring back to a specific slide or she's typing now, but we may not be able to learn before the end of the session what the clarification was. I think that is, oh, she said yes, that's what she meant. All right, well, I know that our presenters have to go, and I do want to make sure that I take the time to thank them again for spending their time with us today and sharing their journey in developing buy-in at their agencies. And thank you again for participating. And our next webinar series hasn't been scheduled yet, but we do them in general every couple of months. And with that, I am going to close the meeting. Thanks again. Goodbye.
Thank you.